Hi there, Section 24. I have gotten around to getting into town to get that HD card. God darn it, are those things expensive. They really charge a lot for these little guys. I hope you're well on Wednesday, October 19th, as our course, your course and mine now, continues to swerve off in an outrageous and very different direction. And I'll probably get up a couple of videos for you within today or tomorrow, including this one. And you can watch them at your leisure. It is break, right? Break is what it proclaims itself to be. So do take a break and catch your breath and keep trying to get your head around the fact that you have a new English teacher and this class has a new start. Super fast bio. You'll probably learn a thing or two about me as we move along. I'm a self-discloser. I tell people everything that's in my heart. That little phrase, heart is on my sleeve, is probably true of me. Super fast bio. I was born in 1959, crash landed on planet Eisenhower, and I grew up on the Mississippi River in the Champlin-Anoka area. Anoka is where I went to high school, and I share that high school with the very famous Garrison Keillor and MacGyver, if you know who that guy is. And, you know, middle-class background. My dad was an insurance salesman. My mama was a nurse. A couple of troubled sisters, Medea and Antigone, as I always jokingly call them. And for college, you know, if you want my credentials, I went to St. John's University for a while because I wanted to pursue degrees in English, history, and in the humanities. I fell in love with St. John's in particular and Stearns County in general, which I'm sitting in the middle of right now. And my early 20s was just kind of a wheel-spinning exercise to getting back here, and I did achieve that. My senior year, I fell in love with a dear friend's girlfriend, and yeah, I'm that guy. I married her. My wife and I, Jessie, have been married now 36 years as of September 6th of last month, and we wanted a large family, but two boys came into the room, and Will and Jeff. Will is 25, and Jeffy is 28 years old. I got grandchildren on order. I don't know where they are. Professionally, you know, I started teaching in the 80s. My first teaching job was in Little Falls, Minnesota, teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade language arts. I kind of ran from that, as you might, from a burning building, and found myself going to graduate school for English at St. Cloud State University. And then I started up a 19-year career at St. John's Prep School, teaching English and coaching cross-country and speech, and I was happy there, or what passed for happy. I had everything but money because private schools tend not to pay very well. And then I tend to tell most of my classes, and this is the reason I'm at CLC, and I got more to say about this later, I had a pretty dramatic career swerve. Just after the aughts, a new principal came to my high school. And I'm not shaking my fist at her. I've long forgiven her. And she had a plan for changing the direction of the high school. When she arrived, everything was AP, right? AP English, AP History, AP Bio. And she came with a kind of a covert plan to convert the high school to the International Baccalaureate program. And that got a little bit rough for me, like, you know, super rough. I was part of a kind of the center of a revolution that went very badly against her and a priest who doesn't need to be named. And I was fired. I was dramatically, brutally grudge fired in front of God and everybody. And it was one of the roughest things I've ever had to live through. An entire generation of alums tried to defend me. I wrecked a school. That's my street cred. And the following year, the spring I got fired, a bunch of professors at St. John's and St. Ben's and St. Cloud State, I'm looking over there where they are, they sat me down and said, you know, dude, you just wrecked a school. You're not going to get another contract in a high school again. Let's have a little sabbatical year. Let's go back to graduate school, and let's finally get a master's degree so you can keep speaking. I had a lapsed teaching license. I had an unfinished MA from the 80s, and that's what I did for 1 year. The year I turned 50, I was a 50-year-old graduate teaching assistant, teaching one class a comp, making $13,000 a year, and taking classes, hanging out with 20-somethings that were all tattooed and pierced, and with hemp necklaces, as I always say. I became their troubled uncle. They invited me to their parties. I never went. I always came back to our little farm here, to my wife and the boys. And the following year, I was so super scared. I took three teaching jobs. One at St. Cloud State, one at the College of St. Benedict, where I taught for another couple of years. And this college, Central Lakes College, just completely took a hold of me. And it's just the way things go sometimes. You think something horrible is happening to you. You don't really realize that you should be concentrating on what's being created instead of destroyed. And what happened in the end was that I found the greatest teaching job of my life in the Minn-State system at Central Lakes College. I've been happy there ever since, and I hope to do this for a few more years. Heaven will decide whether or not my health is going to hold or not. And we've already seen what happened to Christine, so that makes me a little bit nervous. So that's my whole life story. I live in Stearns County. I live in two kingdoms. I call this my southern kingdom, and I call the Brainerd Lakes region my northern kingdom. I have a kind of a strong thrice weekly commute, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Perfect teaching schedule. Teach a day, catch my breath. Teach a day, catch my breath. And it's perfect. And I've really gotten used to the driving. That's where I do all my thinking and scheming, and do a little praying there too. Okay, that's 5 minutes of your time, 6 minutes. A quick little blast on the history of Comp 1. And then I got a couple other more things to do here, and we'll call this a video. We've been teaching courses like this in this country for a long time. Somewhere around here, I've got so many books at this point that I can't even find the ones I'm looking for, but somewhere here, I've got a book called Freshman Composition, the Experimental Edition. The publication date on that is 1918, so it goes way back. But to get a little bit dry and give you a little bit of a history lesson, it was in the 1960s that a couple of things happened. The baby boom generation that I'm kind of on the tail end of, well, they wanted to go to school. They thought they were entitled to college and university degrees. Another thing happened. A whole bunch of boys came home from fighting the war in Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War, including my uncles, who came home without a scratch on them. And basically what happened is millions of people were suddenly showing up at colleges and universities with really not a lot of ability to produce mathematics or writing. And what had been a thing, so to speak, really became an industry called freshman composition. And the premise is basically this. Let's take young university students or college students and have them take 1 or 2 intensive courses in writing to promote literacy. Let's get them thinking, writing, speaking, and working towards literacy, being more literate. I stumbled there. I'll edit that out. And the premise is this: if you give someone, I hate to think about vaccines during a pandemic, but one of the metaphors I've used is this: the premise is if you give someone kind of an inoculation of writing, so to speak, of composition theory, that, if it's done properly, for the rest of their college careers, students, in theory, would be able to write capably and speak and think capably in the other discourse communities that they're going to be going to. And it kind of works, and it also has limitations. I've always been bothered all my career how everyone blames literacy, lays it at the door of the English department. I think that we should read and write in all classes across the disciplines, but that's never how it's been. We are sort of always on the hook if people can't speak and write with grace and eloquence. And there's limits to it. There's limits. So I, Christine, any of these writing teachers that teach Comp 1 at Central Lakes College should be letting you know that this is not going to be the end of your learning how to read and write. This is an opportunity, if that makes any sense. It is a chance for you to have some practice, particularly at writing and reading. And in the doing of that, you will get better at it. Quick comment about my department. It's a great one. It's an absolutely great one. You can't go wrong with any of us. If there's a weak link, it's me. And what's neat about the department at Central Lakes College, the English department, is that we've all kind of found a little niche. A little area that we can kind of map out and call our own. And I won't go through everybody's deal, but I'm thinking of the brilliant Adam Marcotte. He's really interested in a guy named Ken McCrory and helping his students write mythographies. Leanne Flynn is interested in women's studies, and especially environmental literature, which is very popular right now. Sweet Ryan Deblock, who wears fleece pretty much every single day, he's into nonfiction. He is into, not nonfiction, excuse me. He is into fantasy and science fiction. That's his deal. He sits in his office all day long and reads comic books. Fort, Matthew Fort, the most brilliant, hilarious teacher at the college. You should take him sometime. I would call one of his strengths American literature. Brandy Lindquist is a writing teacher's writing teacher, man. She is a composition head all the way. She even has that in her little SIG on her email. She's a real writing teacher, unlike me. I'm a fraud. But not when it comes to literature and poetry and imaginative literature. I also give my Comp 1 students, and it's a little late for you because it's already happened, a very serious blast of classical rhetorical theory, because like Christine, your teacher, I have a great interest in argumentation and persuasion. And so rhetoric is a really big deal to me. And we all teach Comp 1 differently. So wherever you land in Comp 1 or Comp 2, we all approach it differently. The big deal is that we try to get to about 5,000 words of formal corrected prose. Now, last thing I want to talk to you about today before I hook you up with a little bit of poetry and tell you about my poetry series. Now, I want to be very careful here. I think if anybody looked at my course, there'd just be holes all over the place. So while I'm going to have just slight disagreements with how Christine has run things so far, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. She's a different teacher than me, and I'm a different teacher than her. And that's one of the things that is part of your challenge right now, to adapt from one teaching method to another. So, I think I got 3 or 4 things here that I want to talk about. For me, the academic journal is a big deal. It's 40% of all of my classes' grades, which means from here on out, keeping a journal is going to be 40% of your grade. It's not complicated, but it's going to be different because this is asynchronous, which is a challenge for me. In my physical classes, my face-to-face classes, where I really want to be, because that's where I'm living in vivid companionship with my students, there is a tradition. On the first day of every class, I have a dedicated classroom, kind of. I share it with other people, but all my classes are in E339, and I love it there. It's a dreamy classroom with a courtyard that looks like an aquarium, and 2 big sections. I call them Section A and Quadrant B. So on day 1, I have everybody stand up and face each other. And then I play some solemn ceremonial music, and I give everybody one of my pens. I charge these to the English department. Everybody gets a Faber-Castell Uniball Micropoint, 5mm Deluxe, in the only ink that should be in all the pens of the world, which is black. This thing's like a surgeon's scalpel. And I distribute the pens, and I give them a spiel that I'm kind of giving you an abbreviated version of. I'm a believer, and I believe in typing. It's a necessity. But I also believe in handwritten prose. So if you ever happen to stop by Central Lakes College on a Friday afternoon, around 2 or 3 o'clock, on a winter day, is where it probably looks a little piteous, you're going to see me trying to, well, actually, I backed my truck up to the college at this point. And what I put in that college, in the truck, are 80, 90, 100 notebooks. And I try to pull 40, 50, 60 pages of handwritten prose out of every student that I've got. I can see I read everything in your class so far. I read every announcement post, and I've learned that Christine wasn't commenting on your journals or reading them. I think she said that she would skim them to see if you tried to sneak in any math notes. I'm different. I'm going to read every word of what you write, and I'm going to respond to it. Because this is an online class asynchronously, I'll create a folder each week, and I will put up a little recording. You'll put your journals typed out in the assignment folder, and I will give you a brief spoken response. And that's where else things are going to be a little bit different. I read some of the responses that she gave you for your persuasive paper. Like, I read quite a few of them. And it looks like some of you got maybe a sentence, but most often it was just the grade. And I didn't quite get that. 119 out of 133. It doesn't need to mean anything to me. It meant something to Christine. I try to minimize the typing, especially if it's an online class. So when you hand in your first journal entries next week, what you'll see are points, and I'm not correcting anything. I'm reading them, but I'm not correcting. I'm not telling you where to put the possessive apostrophe. I don't care about that stuff. I'm not a grammarian. You will get a little spoken tape. I use those WAV files. So at the bottom of each thing, you'll see the grade, 40 out of 40, 20 points per page. And it'll be a little recording. It's not like I'm going to talk for a long time, but I'll give you some feedback about what I appreciated about whatever it is you wrote that week. Another thing I learned, so that's different, okay? I'm going to be reading your journals, and they're everything to me. So, kind of get used to that. Another thing is, I could see, and I'm not criticizing this, I'm just observing. I can see that Christine is really into process writing, which is the way all of us were trained, excuse me, how to teach writing in the 80s, probably as late as the 90s. Process writing is what it proclaims. You lead students through a process. You brainstorm. I could see that in your notes. I could see she was trying to teach you how to cluster. And you engage in pre-writing. That's first, right? You write a series of drafts, and then comes publication, revision, and then publication, right? Where you just tell the paper, here's your world. The world, here's your paper. I'm not doing very well today, am I? I should have another cup of coffee. I don't teach process writing. I don't necessarily even believe in it. And I'm not throwing her under a bus. It's a distinction, okay? I'm a different teacher than her. What happens if you put the student through process writing and the product that kicks out of the end like a little machine? Well, what if it doesn't work? I do get it. It's a way to look at writing in a systematic way. And I can get as technical as necessary when it comes to writing. It's just not how I do it. Writing is messy. Human beings, I don't think they write like that. Isn't this what you do? You sit down at a screen, or you sit down at a blank sheet of paper, and you just head out, right? You're not really planning anything. And you work with what we have available to us as writers. Units of meaning. The smallest unit of meaning that's worth talking about is a word. You pile enough units of meaning together like that, and then you get a sentence. You pile enough sentences together, and you get another unit of meaning called a paragraph. And if you pile enough paragraphs together, that unit of meaning could compile into anything. It could be a love letter. It could be a persuasive paper. It could be a declaration of war. It could be a report for one of your supervisors due at 4 o'clock, right? That's what writing is like to me. You just head up this alley looking for meaning. And I don't think, I'm not comfortable trying to systematize it. We probably get the same things done, all of us doing it differently, but so that's that. I'm going to read your journals. Process writing is out the window in the snow with everything else prior to this moment. And well, I've got one other thing. I want to very, very gently disagree with how she described ethos to you. There's a big note that she put up early when you were doing your argumentation thing. And I simply don't think of ethos in that way. Pathos is indeed correctly described to you as an appeal to the emotions. Logos is where I think she got a little blurry there. Logos is a logic-centered appeal that's based on the subject. My understanding of ethos comes straightforwardly from Aristotle's Rhetoric, Book 1. Ethos is a character-centered appeal, and it relies on three things: goodness, goodwill, and knowledge of the subject matter. The Greeks had no patience whatsoever for any orator who didn't radiate goodness, goodwill towards the audience, and know what they're talking about. Problem there, rhetorically? All three of those things can be faked. I'm at 19 minutes. I want to give you a little bit of a treat. First, an idea. One of the things that I do at CLC, in addition to teach, I got off-contract things that I do, like the medallion hunt. I'm in charge of it every year, and I'm super good at it. And what else do I do? Oh, yeah. I direct Verse Like Water, which for 11 years has been bringing over 30 of the greatest poets in this country, on the planet, to CLC. Here's my bookmark from Billy Collins. Hosted that guy 3 times. I don't just talk about poetry. I don't just write poems, read poems to students. I bring the greatest poets to the Chalberg Theater. And man, did that get hard during the pandemic. I had canceled readings. I had readings where I was only virtual readings, right? Where I'm sitting in my office and videography is out in the hallway making me sound good. That was so unsatisfying. And last year, as the clouds tried to part on the pandemic, now layered over with war, I was able to have a live poetry reading with Jenny G 1 year ago this very month. We were wearing masks. I had a virtual reading with Gregory Orr. I had a reading with Kwame Dawes, the Jamaican-American poet. That was enmasked, half capability in the Chalberg, like I could only have half the seats filled. It wasn't until March of this past year where I was able to host Forrest Gander Live, and that's the week at CLC where masks came off, and I was able to host that guy. And I've become friends with all my poets, but with that guy, it's a poetry bromance. Forrest Gander led me to host the great American poet Brenda Hillman last week. And here's the deal. On November 16th, already, next month, my next poet is coming. His name is Chris Abani. And I met him before the world changed at the College of St. Benedict in September of 2019. And I cannot wait to get another 400-pound hug from this guy. And if you come, you'll get extra credit. So I hope you can. November 16th at noon, it'll be followed by a book signing and a craft talk. There's nothing cooler than meeting a great writer in person, and I'm going to keep bringing them to the college until I stroke out in E339. Kevin Young is coming later in the year, and on February 24th, I'm hosting a Hmong poet named Mai Der Vang. That's enough for today. I'm not going to give you a poem necessarily by Chris Abani, but this is the most famous thing that's up on the internet by him. His TED Talk about humanity. I love this sweet guy. I'll see you in the next vid.
My search is always to find ways to chronicle, to share, and to document stories about people, just everyday people. Stories that offer transformation, that lean into transcendence, but that are never sentimental, that never look away from the darkest things about us. Because I really believe that we're never more beautiful than when we're most ugly, because that's really the moment we really know what we're made of. As Chris said, I grew up in Nigeria with a whole generation in the 80s of students who were protesting a military dictatorship, which is finally ended. So it wasn't just me, it was a whole generation of us. But what I've come to learn is that the world is never saved in grand Messianic gestures, but in the simple accumulation of gentle, soft, almost invisible acts of compassion, everyday acts of compassion. In South Africa, they have a phrase called Ubuntu. Ubuntu comes out of a philosophy that says, the only way for me to be human is for you to reflect my humanity back at me. But if you're like me, my humanity is more like a window. I don't really see it. I don't pay attention to it until there's like a bug that's dead on the window, then suddenly I see it. And usually, it's never good. It's usually when I'm cussing in traffic. That's someone who's trying to drive their car and drink coffee and send emails and make notes. So what Ubuntu really says is that there is no way for us to be human without other people. It's really very simple, but really very complicated. So I thought I should start with some stories. I should tell you some stories about remarkable people. So I thought I'd start with my mother. And she was dark, too. My mother was English. My parents met in Oxford in the 50s, and my mother moved to Nigeria and lived there. She was 5'2", very feisty, and very English. This is how English my mother is, or was. She just passed. She came out to California, to Los Angeles, to visit me, and we went to Malibu, which she thought was very disappointing. And then we went to a fish restaurant, and we had Chad, the surfer dude, serving us. And he came up, and my mother said, "Do you have any specials, young man?" And Chad says, "Sure, we have this salmon that's rolled in this wasabi crust. It's totally rad." And my mother turned to me and said, "What language is he speaking?" I said, "English, Mom." And she shook her head and said, "Oh, these Americans, we gave them a language. Why don't they use it?"